Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the channel and to our regular film club live stream. I know it's been a few weeks since we've had a chance to do these, but I've been fairly busy traveling, so it isn't always easy to pull off a live stream on the road. So I'm trying to do that here while I'm in a country for a while, which happens to be the country of my birth, Singapore. And I want to use that time to highlight some really important documentaries, particularly the one that we're talking about today, which is Gaza Doctors Under Attack by Karim Shah. It's not very long, maybe about an hour and 5 minutes, and I hope you had a chance to watch it before today's stream. And if not, I'm hoping that the stream encourages you to go and check it out yourself. It was originally censored on the BBC, so under pressure from the Israel lobby, the BBC pulled it, but it was bravely, I think, aired by Channel 4, although I'm not sure if it's still available on their website, so they may have folded under pressure as well. For those of you who didn't have a chance to watch it before the discussion, you have to realize all 26 hospitals in Gaza have been attacked. And it's one thing to attack hospitals because those are buildings, and one could argue buildings could be rebuilt. But what the documentary really focuses on is the attack of the human infrastructure, doctors, EMTs, medics, other volunteers who work there. That sort of infrastructure takes years. It takes years to make a doctor. It takes years to make an EMT. It takes years to make a nurse. And when you systematically eliminate them, as Israel has done, it puts the Palestinian people further and further back. So as I say, you might say, okay, well, you could rebuild a building. That's fine, if that's even possible when you're constantly being bombed by a criminal organization. But it's different when you say, well, we need to have more doctors. Well, where are you going to get those doctors from? So there's been a campaign, and if you look online, and I'll try to put a link in the description after the stream is over. I didn't do it beforehand, but there's a United Nations report that was published at the end of last year, 31st of December, which documents the attacks on the hospitals by the IDF. And it turns out there is a theme. There is a way that the IDF goes about attacking these hospitals. First, they begin by attacking the surrounding areas and the buildings. This will scare people who are afraid of being hit by enemy fire, understandably. But what are the sort of people that are at a hospital? These are people who are getting treatment, or their homes have been demolished and they have no other place to go. They're going to a place that has shelter, running water, electricity. So the IDF will start by attacking the surrounding areas, and then they'll start moving closer and closer with ground troops. Once they have ground troops nearby, they'll start sniping people. We've seen them snipe children, pregnant women. All of these people are generally unarmed. The superiority that the Israelis have, not only with ground weapons, small handheld munitions, but with tanks, airplanes, drones, it's not comparable. Hamas doesn't have any of those weapons. So to call it a fight or a war or a battle, in the first phase, that sort of fails the definition. It's not really that. It's a massacre, it's a slaughter, it's a genocide. These are the words that should be used. So once the hospital is surrounded by ground troops, then tanks and bulldozers come in and they start to attack things. And we have, I think earlier on, a maternity ward was hit by a tank shell. Now, over and over, the documentarians said, we asked the IDF for comment. And the IDF always says something like, we didn't do this. Israel follows international and Israeli law. So two conclusions have to be drawn here. Either the IDF made a genuine mistake, or they are incompetent. Now, when you look at all the quote unquote mistakes, you have to accept that this can't be a system of mistakes. If I say they're incompetent, these are people who can plant bombs in pagers for 10 years. That's what Mossad was able to do. Are you able to look me in the face and tell me that an organization, a country that is able to plant a secret device and wait for a moment to detonate it for 10 years, they're incompetent? So I reject both of these ideas, either that these are mistakes from the IDF or that they are incompetent. So the only conclusion you can draw is that these are intentional. It is intentional that they are murdering medics. It is intentional that they are shooting children. It is intentional that they are shooting pregnant women. And the documentary starts us with 15 dead medics. Their lights were on. We see it in the video, their lights were on. They gave the route to the IDF, which you're supposed to do in advance when you're moving in a medical convoy, as demanded by international law. They gave all this to them. Israel fired on them and killed 15 medics. And then they claimed that they were running with their lights off. They didn't realize that someone in the convoy, one of the medics, was shooting video while they were doing it, and they found the camera on the dead man, and they published the video. IDF caught in a lie. They said that the ambulance was running with their lights off. It was suspicious, in contradiction of the fact that the lights were on. We can see it in the video clearly, and that their route was pre-published and given to the IDF. So, as usual, lies, 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 lies. We get to follow some very courageous doctors all throughout this process. We start at Al-Shifa Hospital with Dr. Adnan, and one of the heartbreaking scenes that we see here, if the whole documentary isn't heartbreaking in its own way, but we see them digging mass graves. There are so many dead bodies, and they're surrounded by soldiers, so they can't get out. You have doctors in their white coats digging graves for the patients that they couldn't save because they've had their electricity and their water cut off, and they're surrounded by soldiers. These are the actions of the most moral army in the world. Remember that. And this is the place I had said earlier, a tank shell hit a maternity ward. Once again, was this a mistake? Are they incompetent? Or is it the more likely thing, this is intentional? And remember that Israel had claimed this very first hospital, Al-Shifa, had a Hamas command center underneath. And when it was finally taken, no evidence of the Hamas command center found. What a huge surprise. As usual, if the IDF's lips are moving, they are lying. The doctors, Dr. Adnan Al-Bursh and another doctor, do not want to evacuate from the north. They know that Al-Shifa is the heart of the healthcare infrastructure in the north of Gaza. And so for them, it's important to move to a place where they can still stay in the north. But the Israeli forces are evacuating people. And in Palestine, if you study its history, when Israeli forces are behind you pointing a weapon, you do not turn around. You just keep walking. And so what happened was they managed to sneak off the path at some point and found their way to the Indonesian hospital, where they stayed and they worked for some days before that was also besieged, and they moved to the Al-Auda hospital. And I think Dr. Al-Bursh was there for a number of months. His wife had asked, what are you going to do? He says, I'm not going to leave the north. If I leave the north, then the people up here will not get medical care. So this is someone very, very dedicated. The Israelis, of course, accused him of being a terrorist, because we all know that the first thing that terrorists do is stay behind and risk death in order to save people as a doctor. Another hospital that's documented in the documentary is Nasser Hospital. Dr. Khaled Al-Sur is there, and we again have the scene of mass graves being dug because the hospital is surrounded, there are dead bodies around, and to prevent contamination, these bodies, and also by Islamic custom, they need to be buried. And you have doctors, once again, this is not a task that doctors normally do, is to dig graves for patients they couldn't save. And I don't think it's Dr. Al-Sur, but one of the doctors who was there at Nasser Hospital, his son died there. And you see him talking with Al Jazeera, I think the very next day. And how hard is it as a doctor to have your son die there and not be able to save him? This is all prelude to the second part of the documentary, in which they're saying, well, what happens when the hospitals are surrounded, they're bulldozed, the patients are evacuated, and the hospital is rendered ineffective? Because this is another way to make war on people. You take away their food, you take away their clothing, you take away their shelter. They might still have a hospital they can run to. If you demolish the hospital, you take away one other vector of them being saved. But what else do we need to do? We need to kidnap the healthcare workers, torture them, rape them, imprison them. I know it might be difficult to see this, but there's video footage. And as usual, we have the Israelis telling on themselves because they're so proud of their actions. And as we saw in another documentary documenting war crimes in Gaza, if you go to the live tab in the channel, you'll see I did a review of that documentary some time ago, but the Israelis uploaded all of this stuff to social media, telling on themselves. Here's how we blew up this building. Here's us wearing women's lingerie after we raided some Palestinian family's house. And they have video footage of of medical workers and other detainees stripped and tied, and some they zip tied the hands of patients. So people from the hospital, they zip tied them. So the footage that they have doesn't necessarily show that, but we have accounts of people saying this is what happened. Even some Israeli whistleblowers who were brave enough, I have to give them credit, for talking to the documentarians during this. They were shielded and they used an actor to cover the voice, but still their testimony matters. So either these Israeli whistleblowers and the Palestinians are making this all up, or the IDF is lying. I'll let you choose which of those is more believable. So if you don't know about what happens in these Israeli prisons, many violations of human rights and international law, but I did a review. If you click on the videos tab of the channel, you'll see I did something called Welcome to Hell, which was a summary of a B'Tselem, which is an Israeli human rights organization. And they documented, I want to say, 40, 50 cases of people who were imprisoned in State Taiman post-October 2023. And they have testimonies of the tortures, the rapes, the inhuman treatment. And because this is a documentary focusing on medical workers, the fact that Israeli medics would refuse to treat Palestinians. Israeli doctors would refuse to treat them. And one of the Palestinian doctors says, you're a doctor at the end of the day. He says, yes, but you're a prisoner, or you're a terrorist, or you're not a human. And this accords with what's going on in Israeli society. Gideon Levy has shared this with us numerous times, that the trauma goes both ways. When you inflict inhuman behavior on other people, you yourself are not unscathed. As the Israelis have done this to the Palestinians, they have harmed their own souls, they've harmed their own persons. And the sickness has spread throughout the society, such that they say that it's proper to rape prisoners, and that they will break out people from jail who are effectively convicted of doing such things. So we've referenced before human rights reports. This documentary references a United Nations report. Is the United Nations in on a conspiracy against Israel? Remember, is it anti-Semitic to accuse Israel of war crimes? The International Criminal Court brings a case forward with South Africa backing it. I guess South Africa is anti-Semitic now as well. So they have to be sanctioned for daring to accuse Netanyahu of war crimes. All of these documentaries put together, you have to think about how unbelievable it is that in this short amount of time, between October of 2023 and October of 2025, which is not so very far from now, we've managed to have evidence upon evidence upon evidence of Israelis committing war crimes, committing genocide, and then pretending that they are the victims. That's the unbelievable thing. The perpetrators of the occupation, the perpetrators of the violence, they claim they are the victims, when the entire world has witnessed, by social media, by video, what crimes have been committed. And the question is, when will they be held accountable? And as we've said on the channel before, as long as the United States continues to back Israel, the day of reckoning is indefinitely postponed. But it does not mean that we cannot educate ourselves in the meantime. And I would encourage you, as I said, if you haven't had a chance to watch the documentary, please do so. And if you have any questions, it's an unusual time for us to do a stream. We normally do it on Saturdays, normally in the evenings, European time, and the afternoons, American time. But I wanted to do this anyway, because it was the best possible time I could find to do it. And as I say, if you haven't had a chance to see it, please do. It's difficult, as many of these documentaries are, but it's well worth your time. And if there aren't any other questions, I will wrap up for today. And please do go back and take a look at some of the other videos that I referenced. They will help put together a picture of what's going on. This is focusing on one specific aspect, the attack on medical workers in contravention of international law, despite the fact that Israel consistently says we follow international and Israeli law. That is a lie on its face. And the images and the testimony in this documentary testify against that claim, that assertion. All right. Well, I don't see any other questions. So thanks for taking the time to stop by. And if you're watching this on replay, please feel free to keep the discussion going in the comments. I will do my best to answer them as quickly as I can. And as I said, please watch the film when you have a chance.